welcome back. It's good to see you all again, and we're going to get to part 2 of the worst moments for NHL franchises, and today we're going to be focusing on the Western Conference. Thanks everyone who came by and looked at the Eastern Conference video. We'll just get right into it. So we're going to start alphabetically. We're going to start with the Anaheim Ducks, and the Anaheim Ducks have been a pretty good franchise for, making the playoffs and going deep in the playoffs. Although they only have that one Stanley Cup in 2007, they do have a moment or two that can be definitely said that was pretty bad. So definitely Paul Kariya getting hit by Scott Stevens, although that wasn't the fault of the Anaheim Ducks. It was a really bad moment in the franchise, and that sticks in people's minds that are fans of Anaheim. And from one that I watched, that I can take in my own opinion and say that this is definitely one, Anaheim losing in the Western Conference Final in 2015 to Chicago. They took a 3-2 series lead with Matt Bolesky scoring the overtime winner at home, and so all they had to do was close out the series, had 2 chances to do it, and Chicago came back and won 2 straight. So the Arizona Coyotes, at the time the Phoenix Coyotes, lost in overtime to the Kings, Dustin Penner scoring and sending the Kings to the Stanley Cup Final. That was the furthest that the Coyotes as an organization have ever went in the playoffs, and that still stands today. Now the Calgary Flames definitely having a chance to win the Stanley Cup in overtime in 2004 on home ice and losing. Martin St. Louis scored the overtime winner, sent it back Game 7 in Tampa Bay, and ultimately they lost that game and the Stanley Cup. Now the Edmonton Oilers, I have a lot of recent memories of the Oilers being bad and of bad moments, but as a respect to every generation who's watched it and me doing my research, it's definitely come down to Wayne Gretzky getting traded from the Edmonton Oilers. It was absolutely devastating to hockey fans and Oilers fans. He was their prodigy. He was Edmonton, and him getting traded to Los Angeles just seemed like an end of an era because of the Stanley Cups that he brought them and the memories that he brought them. Definitely the worst moment in franchise history for the Oilers. Now Los Angeles Kings, piggybacking off of the Gretzky topic, that's the years that followed after Wayne Gretzky left Los Angeles. The team went bankrupt and they had to sell the team and gut the whole roster, and they went almost a decade of no playoffs, and even into the 2000s when they made the playoffs, they went on long stretches of being bounced very early. Now the San Jose Sharks, losing in Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final in 2016 to the Pittsburgh Penguins. This was the furthest that the Sharks have ever gone as an organization, and this just proved that they were not in fact going to get over that hump. And whatever you consider that being, I think every year they thought it was cup or bust in San Jose, especially with that core, and they proved that they would not get it done with that core. Now to the Vancouver Canucks. They have lost in 2 Stanley Cup Finals, but the one that sticks out is 2011. They were going into Game 7. There was a lot of hype around the day and the event, obviously being the last game of the NHL playoffs and the last hockey game of the year. The Canucks were coming in on home ice Game 7. Ultimately, they were shut out by the Boston Bruins 4-0, giving the Bruins their first cup since the Bobby Orr days. And right after the game followed the Vancouver riots. Down to the Vegas Golden Knights. They lost to the Washington Capitals in the Stanley Cup Final in 2018 in their inaugural season, and a lot of people didn't feel bad for them, but as a team that was on the rise right away, and a team that was going on such a hot streak and such a high, it was really devastating for everyone involved and the fans for the ride and the journey just to be over. But the team's still amazing today, and I think that they will get it done at some point, especially with all the free agents that they've got and trades that they've made. and they're not doing too bad draft-wise. So that's still, obviously, they're very young as a franchise, but that's the worst moment so far for them. Now the Chicago Blackhawks, their worst stretch was 1998 to 2008, where they went on a playoff drought, and obviously Kane and Taves were a big part of relieving that and getting them back into the playoffs, getting lucky in the draft, acquiring the first overall pick. The second moment that I have to mention is definitely when they lost in Game 7 of the first round to the Vancouver Canucks. Alex Burrows scored the overtime winner, and it took 3 playoff series for the Canucks to overcome the Chicago Blackhawks. They always lost to them in the first round or the playoffs, wherever they met them, but that was the first time where they really took them down, and that was a really big blow because people thought they were going to go back-to-back Stanley Cups. Now the Colorado Avalanche, they were just coming off their second Stanley Cup in franchise history, coming over from the Nordiques, obviously. So they just came off their 2001 Stanley Cup, and they had very heavy expectations going into 2002. And what ended up happening is they faced the Red Wings in the Western Conference Final. They lost 7-0 in Game 7, embarrassingly walked off the ice, and that's how the season ended for the defending Stanley Cup champions. Dallas Stars, obviously very fresh in the memory, only a couple months ago, and losing this year in the Stanley Cup Final was their second time losing in a Stanley Cup Final, so they have an 0-2 record in their last 2 finals, and the previous one was losing in overtime via Jason Arnott scoring the overtime winner on Ed Belfour. So their last 2 they have lost, and these are the 2 worst moments for them. Minnesota Wild, definitely just being constantly mediocre. They're one of the teams that I look at and I wonder what's wrong. And it seems like they are too afraid to go in one direction or the other. And also the thing that's dragging them down is definitely having Ryan Suter and Zach Parise's contracts and them not being nearly as impactful as they used to be. And it's tied the hands of the Minnesota Wild, but it also seems that they just haven't been able to develop that top-end talent, the top-end scoring talent, and the games are very boring to watch. But every time they would get into the playoffs, they would be very underwhelming. And nothing against Minnesota, but they would basically be a doormat to the second round of the playoffs for whoever was playing them. Now to the Nashville Predators, 2017, they lost to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and that, again, just like San Jose the year before, was the furthest that franchise ever went. Obviously, I've never won a Stanley Cup, and that was the closest they have got since. They have not returned to the Stanley Cup Final, and they were on the end of back-to-back Stanley Cups, and they just happened to be the second defeat from the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Nashville hasn't been able to rebound. Now, St. Louis Blues, obviously just their playoff failure in general throughout their entire existence, and they made the playoffs consistently throughout it, but they would fail consistently throughout it. And obviously them getting their Stanley Cup in 2019 ended any talk about that, but they just need to continue the success and continue to get deep in the playoffs and possibly another cup with this core. Now the Winnipeg Jets, they lost in Game 7 in the Western Conference Final to the Vegas Golden Knights en route to their first Stanley Cup Final in their first year. That's definitely, since Winnipeg's returned, their worst moment, because that was the closest that they got, and they really thought that, hey, this is an expansion team, we really have a shot to get to the final. And I'm not going to lie, as a Canadian team fan, I was definitely riding the Winnipeg Jets that year, because obviously they were Canada's last hope at that time. And again, no team going to the Stanley Cup Final representing Canada, and no Stanley Cup for Canada. Alright, so that's all the Western Conference teams and their worst moments. I hope you guys enjoyed this little 2-part series, and if you guys have any comments or suggestions, please leave them down below and comment, and I'll definitely consider them. And don't forget to hit the like button and hit the subscribe button if you want to stick around. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.